Hi, I'm Ruth Molman from the Farmington Hills Historic District Commission, and we're here to discuss what happened when people experienced the change in economic things that were going on in the 1930s, 1920s, 1930s. The 1920s had been a fabulous time of growth with cars, television, subdivisions, and subdivisions with such amenities as indoor plumbing and this sort of thing, and city water. And the stock market was soaring, and it was fueled by the fact that you could put as little as 10% down on a stock and own it. And it all came down, crashing down in 1929, or possibly a little bit before, but that's when the stock market came down. And it was a revaluation of all property throughout the world. It wasn't just in our community. And I have a lady here with me, Dorris Boring, who is going to tell us how it affected her family when all this happened. Now, how many were in your family?
There were 5, mother, father, and I had 2 brothers, an older brother and a younger brother, and myself. And I was born on Easter Sunday. I'm 86. My older brother is 2 years older, and I have a younger brother, 5 years younger.
And both brothers here in Farmington?
And my one brother is still in Farmington on Greening Road, north of 12 Mile. And he still owns the property, and it is now considered wetlands because of the deer and the swans and geese and all the habitat there. And it's a nice piece of property, but he's not going to divide it while he's alive, I guess.
Now, your other brother is where?
And my other brother is deceased, and he, yes.
Now, what did your family do? And
my father was a promising attorney. We had a home in Rosedale Park, 19355 Gainsborough, and I had my growing up years, my adolescent years at Rosedale Park. And then in 1937, they nailed the foreclosure sign on our front door, and we had to find some place to live. And so my father owned the property in Farmington, and he built just a shell of a house, no partitions, just the shell, and that's where we moved to Farmington and Greening Road, and that property is still the property that my brother owns. Mm-hmm. And I went to Bond School for my 8th grade, and the freshman, junior, sophomore, and senior to Farmington High School.
Yeah, your family was very lucky that they had fine schools.
Yes.
Sort of a resort area for you, but it was the farming area here.
And I used to walk to Bond School from the house because at that time, I guess there were buses running, but my timing wasn't good, so I would walk to Bond School and then walk home, which was just north of 12 Mile and from Bond.
It was a couple of blocks, actually, wasn't it?
Yeah, a couple of blocks. By then, it was just a lot of it was vacant land. There was a Russian farmer that lived on Orchard Lake Road, north of 12 Mile. I used to cut through his property to get to our house. And a very good friend of mine, Shirley Kekkonen, her mother had a chicken farm, and we used to go in and gather the eggs so that she could sell them. And at the corner of Farmington, at Orchard Lake Road and 12 Mile, there was a one-story building that apparently had been a chicken coop or something, but they used to sell chicken dinners on Sundays, and those chicken dinners were 50 cents for the whole chicken dinner, the mashed potatoes, everything. And sometimes we'd be able to go there and have a chicken dinner, but not very often. And we eventually bought a goat from the Russian farmer that had goats for sale because my younger brother needed nourishment for because he was undernourished, and he had to have goat's milk for nourishment.
You didn't pasteurize it or anything, you just...
No, and our milk was delivered by pickup truck every day, and the bottles, I don't know whether they were hardly washed, but that's the way we got our milk, from Roy Kramer on, I believe the barn was on Middle Belt Road, if I'm not mistaken, and we got our milk from him. And I used to sometimes walk over to Middle Belt. There was a farmer there that had a big pond, and we were able to go ice skating all winter on his pond. But that was a mile from Middle Belt back to Greening to walk in the cold. And but we didn't have access to a car or anything then. And
how did your mother get to work and your father get
my
to work?
mother and father went downtown. My father had an office in the First National Bank building, and he eventually closed that because he felt that there needed to be some changes made in the government. And he was so devastated when they nailed the foreclosure sign on our property in Rosedale Park that he kind of gave up on practicing law. But he eventually went back into practicing law, and he wrote a lot of the bylaws for the MUCC, Michigan Unemployment Compensation Commission. And so he spent his last years in practicing law for the government again.
What did he do in between?
Well, he had many clients that still felt that he did such a great job for them. And many of them couldn't pay him because they didn't have money to pay him. And so sometimes he would come home with big pans of baklava. Sometimes he came home with, and one time he came home with 2 live chickens, and another time he came home with a little bag of diamonds from a jeweler in downtown Detroit. And the jeweler worked for Miller Jewelry Company where the old streetcars used to turn around, and the turnaround down in very downtown Detroit. And he was always coming home with something that someone had brought to him in payment for his what he could do for them. And he was always trying to help somebody that didn't have money to pay for legal advice. But I still, to this day, have some of his furniture from his law office, beautiful pieces of furniture that he had in the First National Bank building.
Now, your mother did what?
And my mother was a teller for the bank that is now Comerica, but at that time it was Detroit Bank and Trust. And she worked on Woodward Avenue and the West Grand Boulevard, and my father would drop her off and then drive on down to the First National Bank building and park. But then when he gave up his office, why my mother would take a bus on 6 Mile Road and go downtown, and then she'd take a bus back home, and I would ride my bicycle sometimes up to 6 Mile, and that's when we were still living in Rosedale, and meet her and wait for her.
What did you do when you moved to Farmington? I know the streetcar was gone.
The streetcar was gone, and my father had this little V8 Ford that he would drive my mother back and forth either to the bus line or to the where she could get on to her job, because it was important that she work, because she got actual money from her job, and by then my father wasn't getting anything that he could count on but I can remember when we had just coins for food, and there was a market on Grand River at that time that if you had enough coins, you could get a pound of tub butter for 25 cents.
Wow.
Yeah, and but we always had food. We always were able to have a good meal, and part of it was because, like I say, I would get out of high school and walk down to Orchard Lake Road and stick my thumb out and hitchhike back to the house so that I could start dinner every night.
They didn't realize how dangerous that was, did they?
And you know, I didn't think anything about it. I just did it and didn't even think about it. And sometimes, some of the, I guess they were Ford workers, they would even gauge it so that when I'd get out of school, one of their cars would be waiting there for me to take me on up to 12 Mile Road. And I used to get off at the Russians' property because I could cut through from Orchard Lake to Greening, and that was easier for me than getting off at 12 Mile.
Wow.
Yeah.
And what did you do after high school?
After high school, there was a Montgomery Ward store on Greenfield and Grand River, and my mother bought my brother and I a Model A for $50. $50 for a Model A, and I learned how to crank it and then run around so that I could keep the magneto from stalling. And I used to drive the Model A back and forth to Montgomery Ward's. I worked part-time on weekends and while I was in my senior year. Yeah. And I bought all my own clothes, bought my mother's first set of community plate silverware. I still have that set of silverware that I bought for her out of funds that I got from Montgomery Ward. Yeah.
They give you a discount?
I don't remember getting a discount, but things were so inexpensive. Now I look back, but at the time they weren't inexpensive. And I remember I bought the set of silver, and I put it in layaway, and I'd go to take people to see the set of silver that I'd bought from my mother.
Oh.
I was so proud of it, you know. But those were normal things that I did, and I didn't think there was anything unusual about being, and I can't say being poor, because I always was able to have a few coins of some kind, either from babysitting. Like I used to babysit for 50 cents a whole Saturday night, and it would add up. And I did a lot of little odd jobs and like I say, bought most of my own clothes in my junior and senior year in high school, and went to the prom in high school, and thought, doesn't everybody have the same opportunity? And I think everybody at that time tried to do the same things. Our leisure time was spent either playing a kickball or playing. We didn't have a lot of movies. I remember when the theater went in Farmington, and it was 10 cents to go to the theater, and that was a big time if we could go to the theater, and those were growing up years, and then after I was out of high school, I still enjoyed helping at home a lot, because my mother by then, I'm sure, was tired of all the years that she'd worked, and so I continued to help her a lot. My brother did too, and then of course when I married in '45, I married a metallurgical engineer, and from that time on, it was a good life. I didn't have to struggle because he made a good living, and but I know what those years were like.
Now, where did you live at that time?
At 92 West Ferry. We had a little apartment, and one bedroom apartment, and he worked for a commercial steel treating company, and he wound up, though, being a president of a alloy company that had alloy that went into the first missiles that went up.
Wow.
Yeah.
And you went to school while you were
I
in there.
went to night school at Wayne State, and because I could walk from Ferry, because they had areas where they taught night school in that whole campus section, and so I'd take a couple of classes and did that for a couple of years, and then I went to art school, which was up on Woodward Avenue at the Boulevard, and I did art school up there. But school at that point was never, I mean, it was okay to take the classes, but I wasn't going after a degree at that time, because by then I was married and was very happily content, to get on with life. Yeah.
And you had 2 daughters?
And we had 2 daughters, but we were married 9 years before we had our first little one, and today she is 58 years old. So she still is a part of my life. She lives on 10 Mile in Middle Belt, and the other daughter lives in Tennessee.
Oh dear. You brought some pictures that we could share.
Well, yes, I did, and
It's very exciting.
well, this was me at 6 years old. That's the house on Gainsborough where they nailed the foreclosure on the door.
What a gorgeous house.
And this was the backyard at Rosedale Park. And this was, again, the backyard. My mother and myself and my brother.
I see you have a stone fence there.
Yes, and my father actually put those stones together. And, you know, he used to do all kinds of things in his leisure time. And other than play, he played the piano, the clarinet, the bassoon, the saxophone, harmonica, 2 harps. I can name almost every instrument that he played, and he played them all well. And but he also laid that fence. But he did have a pet crow that he used to go out in the backyard and whistle, and that pet crow would come, and there is a picture of the pet crow.
And your father.
Pardon me?
And that's you.
And that's me and my father and the pet crow.
What an adorable haircut.
And,
It's so cute.
But, you know, and I didn't think anything about those things, but it was, I guess it was part of history, you know, the growing up years of when he would do things, and he was a very interesting, promising attorney, you know, and unfortunately he didn't live to see his dreams come true, but he was an interesting human being. And
You can see the house is brick, and it looks like you have a French door there. It's very nice.
yeah, this was junior year in high school. My good friend Annabelle Hubert, and she lived on Orchard Lake Road next to the Russian farmer. And
She's got a Farmington letter
yes,
on her.
she was very active in sports, and we spent a lot of time together. We'd bicycle together and play kickball, sometimes baseball. But I used to have to get home to do chores and start dinner, and Annabelle's mother didn't have to work, so her mother was home all the time.
The roads, how did you manage your bicycle over those roads? Most of them were...
Well, Orchard Lake Road was paved. Orchard Lake was paved at that time. Now, Greening was not, Alice K was not, and 12 Mile, I don't remember too much about it other than the chicken shack that was there serving dinners on Sundays. But we'd managed the bicycles. In fact, one time at one of the high school dances, one of the fellows wanted to deliver his papers, and we took his bicycle and his papers and me and the bicycle, and we delivered all the papers on the bicycle that afternoon. Yeah.
It looks like such fun.
And this was taken on Grand River, where they had picnic tables, where in the median on Grand River, and we used to go there we'd pack up a picnic and take it to, and that's when I was living in Southfield even, and those were married years, you know, after I had married.
It looks like a very sizable center there.
Oh, yes, and
It keeps getting smaller
I know it does. I know it does, Ruth.
as things develop. It's great.
Yeah. And this was me with the bicycle.
Oh, your bicycle.
This is my bicycle that I paid all my babysitting money for, and
Boy, it must have taken quite a bit, 50 cents.
and you know, I don't remember what happened to the bicycle when I left the house on Greening, but sometimes you don't pay too much attention to the things that were so important at the time.
It looks like you had the white sidewalk tires.
Oh, it
and,
was
oh,
a beautiful, beautiful roll fast. And there was a little bicycle shop on the corner of Evergreen and Grand River. And I don't remember whatever happened to the bicycle shop after I left. Why, I don't know. But now Grand River and Evergreen is all stores, and the places have changed so many times, you know.
Everything changes. We have to swing with it.
You know, yeah. And how everything can change so completely in a lifetime, and you don't think anything about it at the time, but now you're bringing it back to my memory, the things that did change and things that were important back then. And Farmington, the 12-mile, 13-mile area was very sparse, you know, a lot of trees and not as many homes as I can remember. The homes were very tiny on Greening Road, and
they've expanded them since. They all have additions there.
And it was very muddy when it would rain because of the dirt roads that we were living on, and Greening Road was dirt. And
not even gravel?
You know, eventually it became, they must have put the gravel into it, but I can remember many times getting stuck with the old galoshes on when I would cut through the Russians' property. And that's the way it was. And if you wanted to get to your friend's house, you walked through the mud. And
what did the farmer grow, do you know?
Oh, well, he mostly had goats that he had for sale, and he had beautiful, beautiful corn and things in the summer that he could sell to the neighbors. And I remember my mother used to buy berries from him, and strawberries, and I remember the day that my mother brought home a box of bird's eye frozen peas when we were still living in Rosedale, and there was no such thing as frozen foods then. And she brought home a box of frozen peas and bird's eye. I remember that.
Did you have the refrigerator and this kind of, and a freezer? And
we had a refrigerator with the coils on top at Rosedale Park, and there was a little room, like a storage room out in the back. There wasn't a refrigerator in the kitchen. There was simply a big sink and a stove in the kitchen and a work table, and then this add-on room that had the coils on top. And then when we moved to Farmington, my mother was able to buy a Gibson refrigerator with coils inside, and that was a big thing for us to get a refrigerator in the kitchen in Farmington. And we still had no cabinets or walls in the house that we were living in, except in the bathroom.
Have you brought any of the furniture from your house in Rosedale Park?
Yes, and my niece still has a couple of the chairs. I have several of the pieces of furniture from my father's law office that I insisted on having restored and put, you know, so that I could enjoy. And other than the community plate silver, I don't have any of the furniture. But my niece has the couple chairs from the living room, and
were you able to squeeze them into this little house your father built?
you know, yeah, we didn't have that much furniture. We had my father's big piano and the 2 harps, and all of his musical instruments were in the living room with no partition. But my father would play music almost every night, or you know, that he was, and that was his relaxation. And
you didn't join the country club that was right down the street?
no, we certainly couldn't do that. We had nothing that was paid for leisure, but we would have picnics, a lot of picnics, a lot of bicycling, and those were just happy times.
Well, it's very kind of you to share all this information with us, and I thank you.
Thank you
for
Ruth.
Coming in. And
thank you for asking, and I hope some of it means something to you and to anyone from Farmington. Like I say, it's been an important place for me to be.
As I said, thank you so much for sharing this with us.
Thank
it's
you,
wonderful.
Ruth.